right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. Welcome to Conversational Collective. We are an open, inclusive community exploring, learning, and creating conversational technology. I'm your host, Meredith Schultz, tonight, and glad you all have decided to join us. Looks like we have attendees from a lot of different cities and areas, so thanks for joining. I know it's 1 hour later than when we usually do these. So glad to have you all here today. So tonight we have a featured talk from Celene Osiecka. And before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping things to cover. First, a big shout out to all of the Conversational Collective organizers. You guys can wave your hands if you're on camera. Brittany, Christy, our founder, Jessica, and Lauren and Matt. Thanks again for helping to create another great event, you guys. And also thanks to our sponsor, Voxable. If you're not familiar, Voxable is a conversation design platform that helps teams design, test, and refine their conversation designs. If you're interested in checking out Voxable, you can sign up for their beta of their new product at voxable.io. I've actually tried it out. It's pretty cool. Really cool to see what they're working on for the future of conversation design. And then if this is your first meetup with us tonight, make sure you join our community. The link is right here, so you can sign up at that link. And signing up will get you access to our Slack group that we have that is growing, as well as our LinkedIn group. That's super helpful if maybe you're looking for a new job in the space, hiring, or if you just want to learn about what other members are reading and learning about in conversational AI. And then also signing up to our community, you will get access to our Conversational Collective newsletter, which we send once a month, so not spammy at all. And we'll let you know about our upcoming events and include some other trending news and resources that we hand curate from our lovely organizers. And then also be sure to follow us on Eventbrite, where we post our events and you can register for the next one there. And you can also follow us on Clubhouse, and we actually have another event coming up. It'll be our second event that we're hosting on Clubhouse next Wednesday. So save the date there, and you can sign up at the URL included here. So if you haven't already, definitely introduce yourself in the chat. We want to know where you're from and what brought you here. And then you can also use the chat to leave questions during the presentation, and we'll go through some questions at the end. So this is our agenda for tonight. Celene will have the floor for about 30 minutes, and then afterwards we'll go into Q&A. We do have some pre-selected questions from some of you who left them when you registered. So we'll start with some of those, and then we'll start going through some of the chat questions further there. So leave them in the chat as you have them, and we'll try to get to all of them tonight if we have time. Cool. All right. So without further ado, I will now introduce Celene. So Celene Osiecka is currently a Senior Director of Conversation Design at 24/7 AI. She's been designing and working with conversational technology like chatbots, AI, natural language, speech recognition, and machine learning for the last 15 years. She has done over 500 conversational interface deployments in the financial, telecom, travel, retail, and education industries. And she has a background in psychology and HCI, which we will be learning about tonight. And she currently leads a global team of conversational designers that seeks to design innovative and groundbreaking conversational interfaces. So with that, thank you so much, Celene, for giving a talk, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited to be here. I think these are awesome, and I love the community, especially during COVID times, right? It's just, so nice to see everybody's faces and still be part of something. So yeah, I love it. So I'm going to, try to make it pretty informal. Everyone's saying, if you have questions, be sure to put them in the chat, and I'll try to get to as many as I can at the end. Let me share my screen here. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. So yeah, I wanted to talk about AI and HI blending. And again, those are just abbreviations. You can probably put them together, but artificial intelligence and human intelligence and how they blend together. So how we as conversation designers need to be thinking about that humans are a big part of the equation. We can't ignore it and frankly need humans to be part of the mix. So going to be talking about what that looks like in kind of more, I would say, traditional styles and some more edge cases that we're starting to think about as well. So a bit about my background. So I'm right now with a company called 24/7 AI. And pretty much we have 20 years of experience, I would say, in conversational expertise and 20 years of experience in contact center expertise. And that's kind of our company plays to the fact that we are kind of experts at looking at both HI and AI together because of those backgrounds. My background mostly was in the first area there, the conversational expertise area. I started with a company that was called IntelliResponse, and we built chatbots before chatbots were chatbots, I'd say. So lots of conversational interfaces that we built for, again, like Meredith said, many, many companies, many industries, verticals across education, enterprise space. And then eventually I came into this company and started to bring other things under my belt. So now we're looking at how we blend the human aspect of that, especially all that contact center expertise, into that conversational AI expertise as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and why I think I can talk to both and how we're starting to look at blend both together. So I just wanted to set this up and give some examples here that I thought kind of set the stage of what we're looking at when we talk about humans and bots and how they play nice or how they don't play nice. So this image, probably many of you have heard it. If you don't, I'll give you a little bit of the background, but Deep Blue was this bot that they created back in, I think in the 80s, that played chess. And Gary Kasparov, who's the guy there staring intently at the board, I think was the best chess player at the time. And they went head to head. And it was interesting because I think this is kind of one of the many, many stories where, you know, if you think of pop culture, you think of all the movies, you think of iRobot, you think of all the, you know, there's rarely do we tell stories in pop culture these days of how humans are going to help us, or sorry, bots are going to help humans. It's usually they help us into a point and then they take over and then, you know, the whole world ends. So it's just interesting that, you know, this is just one example of how we make these bots to help us. There's always going to be this conflict between us and bots. You know, are bots going to take over our jobs? Are they going to become smarter than us? Are they going to eventually take over? You know, when they can start to beat the best chess player in the world, what does that mean? And even Kasparov at the time thought that, you know, it's impossible that a bot could have beat him at this time. And he even thought human was controlling it from behind the scenes. And there was like a big controversy that happened, or he could just not believe that a bot was that smart. So just interesting because that I think is how we kind of see bots and humans and how we play together, right? Rarely do we see, well, I should say, we tend to see a kind of the beginnings of today of how bots can help us, but we don't, I think there's unlocked potential there because we're a little bit scared of what bots can really do. So it's just interesting. That's always going to be in the back of our minds, and whether it was there or not because pop culture said it there, or maybe we are just naturally afraid of it. Another part that I like to often call out is around Microsoft Tay and why humans are important to be part of the bot conversation and why I think will always be needed in some level. So I don't know, again, if anybody heard of the story of Microsoft Tay, but again, I'll recap it, where Microsoft put out this bot on Twitter, more of like a social bot, just, you know, something that it was more trying to kind of get it out there and tell everybody that what it could do. And it was a self-learning bot. So it pretty much took in all the inputs from the user base of what the users were tweeting in and then developed from there. And it really quickly got off the rails. It became, you know, derogatory, mean, racist. It was bad. So they pulled it really quickly. And it just shows that humans were involved in teaching it, but there was no lockdown measures. There was no mitigation. There was no review. And I think there's having self-learning capabilities like that, though it seems cool, there will always be that potential that, you know, just like a human, right? If you send a human off to live in that type of environment, the human's going to learn the same way. So it's the question of bots will always need some type of training and some type of education. And how do we provide that in a controlled and healthy environment for these bots? And then empathy is another factor here. So I'll talk a little bit about empathy here because that's one of the things that humans do really, really well. And bots right now have no concept of empathy. They're not programmed with empathy. They're designed to mimic empathy, but they don't really have empathy. So empathy is a really key factor in how we can potentially humanize these bots, and humans are needed to provide that empathy. So for example, there was this healthcare bot that I think there's a story that somebody came in and said, I'm feeling really sad, really, really suicidal. And after some back and forth conversation, the bot just spit out, you know, the person said, I think I want to kill myself. And the bot said, well, maybe you should. So again, not okay when it comes to there is a level of what bots can do. And the bot just doesn't have any filter, any reasoning to know that that was not the right response. So humans have a lot of need to be part of the equation, whether they're in the forefront or behind the scenes, to be able to coach that bot in the right way. And that's what I'll be talking about today, is how humans can help the growing these bots, maintaining these bots, making them better, optimizing them, including empathy and all those things. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what the human role is in these bots. So when I say humans are involved, at what level? What are humans really doing? So I like this chart because it kind of shows you kind of what bots are good at and what humans are good at. So if you look at the top there, this is a report about the state of chatbots out of 2018. And this is what you can see here, the question here. It says, let me just scroll this up here. If chatbots are available and working effectively for the online services that you use, which of these benefits would you expect to enjoy? So the users that filled out this survey rated these, and you can see at the top, you have 24-hour service, you know, getting an instant response, answers to simple questions, easy communication. All those things are really what AIs are great at. When it gets down to the bottom, you can start to see complaints resolved quickly, a good customer experience, detailed expert answers, you know. So when you're starting to ask what a chatbot's going to do well for you, people start to rely less on those things. They know they're not going to be good. They're not going to expect detailed expert answers from a bot. They're not going to expect friendliness and approachability from a bot. And that's just because bots really aren't there yet. And that's okay. You know, that's where the tech is, and we might get there to some point, but right now it is very known in the community where AI is strong and humans are strong. And we shouldn't necessarily try to make AI strong at all of those things. You know, there is a point where humans can play a role, and customers and users will want humans to play a role. So I just like how that breaks it down, because it's very clear that, you know, when you get to this point, we're going to be focusing on kind of categorizing them and drawing the line there. Oops. So one of the roles that I like to say humans are a part of is kind of like a teacher, right? Like I mentioned before. So humans have the role of building these bots, curating the content, training the models, and then optimizing it, right? Steering the bot on the right path, maybe coaching it in empathy, things like that. So I think of us as not necessarily, you know, we're not as designers and we're teachers, right? Because there is a lot of AI technology where the bot can extrapolate information we provide it. Like, for example, in our technology, we kind of provide sample utterances, you know, 5 to 10 utterances per intent, for example, and then those utterances are extrapolated into thousands of different ways you would say that. So it's the idea where you're teaching, you know, generally follow these guidelines, and then it extrapolates the rest. And it doesn't get them all right. And that's why you have to keep correcting, and you're on an ongoing optimization path. This is just an example of something that we do on a regular basis that I think is critical and important, that I think, and maybe this group will agree, but very rarely when I talk to clients and people who don't build or maintain bots for a living, they see optimization as a dirty word. They see, why does it have to be optimized? That means it's bad to begin with. And it's like, no. It's you start, right. So yeah, the other thing is how you take, so just to remember that chart that we did before, how we had the things that AIs were good at and the things where bots were good at. And we have to know as designers that AIs can't handle everything. So we have to design within the bot when it's okay to pass off to a human and maybe when it's okay to take back. So think of it kind of like, you're not in the best position when playing basketball, you need to pass it to your teammates so they can make the basket, same idea. So we have to think about opportunities of where to do that and how to do that well. And that's really where I'm talking about mostly in the rest of this is how we can pass that baton at the right moment back and forth to a human without really inconveniencing the user at all. So there's kind of 4 frameworks that we do this in. So there's just and some of these I think are regular and traditional. And then I think the last 2 are more, I'll talk a little bit about more because they're a little bit more fringe. So the first one is human to AI. I'll give a couple examples of that. The second one is more AI to human. Then now we're talking about human to AI to human, which gets a little complex. And then the fourth one is AI to human to AI. So I have some examples here that I'll show you more in detail, but yeah, I'll be covering these 4. So the first one is human to AI, and this is an example I'll show you. It's think of it more of just every day where you're accessing, for example, an agent would access a knowledge base when they're looking up information for you, or even when you if you have even you can consider potentially any bot you use personally. Even Clippy, remember Microsoft Clippy from years and years ago. That's kind of the same idea, right? Where you are engaging with an AI, but there's no passing back to a human or no escalating. It's just kind of a human talking to an AI. That's kind of a traditional use case. Another that I think that we deal with a lot of how to do this well is when an AI will hand off to a human. Because when you have a human talking, human can decide when to talk to an AI. So it's a little, we don't have to really design for that as much, because that making the AI helpful. But in this case, we have to know when it's okay to pass to a human, even just the one-way direction. This is, again, very standard. If you call into an IVR, for example, and you don't get the right response, or you say something and we have to pass you to an agent, that's an example of this escalation. FAQ handoff, you're talking to a bot online, and then for whatever reason we can't answer your question, you ask to talk to an agent, we'll pass you off. This is just an example of an IVR, right? Where think of this one-way path I'll be talking about. So users come in from the left. They talk about inbound call center, routing, where this router will either pass you to an agent or pass you into an IVR, or maybe the IVR will pass you back into an agent. But you can see kind of the arrows here going pretty much in one direction. You're going from left to right, and there's not a lot of opportunity to go backwards. And, an agent will usually not ever really pass you back into an IVR or pass you back into routing. And again, I say typically, I have seen cases like, for example, if you're ordering pizza, so you'll go to an agent and then the agent will pass you into like a payment module where you can do your payment there. And I'll talk a little bit about that use case, but that's more of a third and fourth use case. But typically it's this one-way path. And I like to use this example. So those that are from Toronto might know this. If anybody's from near Toronto, if you don't, I'll explain it. But it's so, and you probably have similar things like collector lanes where in the bigger cities around there. So there are these, basically think of it as you have your express lane, which is straight, you're going down this one path, and your collector lane, or an exit or something like that too. But if you, let's say long down the road, I miss my exits coming up, you have to be in the collector lane to go to your exit. If you miss that, you'll be stuck in the express and have to go way down, turn around and come back. So it puts you on this path where, you can think of it a one-way street, but this is a little bit more exemplified, I think, because that's what I feel sometimes when you get thrown into an IVR or thrown into this experience. You get put down a path and you didn't really choose that path. And if you made a mistake, you're stuck, and you can be stuck for a long time. And you might even have to redial and start the whole thing again if you're an example in that IVR. It's just not a great experience for a user. It doesn't give them that control. It doesn't give them the ability to say, no, I don't want to be in this path. Please, go back or something like that. Now, sometimes it's expensive for the companies you're doing this too. So if you're designing this for like an enterprise company, a phone call, especially a voice call, is very expensive compared to keeping them in an automated platform. So, giving the user that choice of where they go is important too. So I wanted to show an example here. We'll see if I can do it. And I think it's just an example of this one-way path, but there are some best practices of how you can do it well. So let me just stop sharing my screen here. Let me share this other example. Yeah, so this is just an example of an online FAQ bot that we built. And I'll show you this path of kind of seamless integration or seamless escalation and what's happening here. Again, it's still pretty much right in this experience. This is synchronous. And in synchronous experience, it's pretty much one way. So I'll explain what that means and I'll tell you what the different experience might be in asynchronous. So I'll go through my path here. This is a DirecTV. If anybody has DirecTV, you can try this out as well. So I go through here, I'll say something like remote help. And it says, which remote do you need help with? And I'll say my universal remote. And I'll say my remote is not working. You can do things like videos, images, things like that to help them. Let's say for some reason, I tried it, didn't work. So that didn't help. So now it gives me the option. If it didn't help, now it's asking me, do you want me to find me an agent? Or you can ask more questions. You don't have to talk to an agent. I'm not going to force you to do that if you don't want to, because we find a lot of users don't want to talk to an agent right away. So let's say I say, find me an agent. So we can also pass them to an async channel, which is what that QR code was, but somebody actually picked up right away in this case. So you can see here. So Rose picked up automatically. It tells me that I'm talking with Rose. So it tells me I'm talking with a human. So I've been passed from a bot to a human. As she's typing, I'll show you up here. So you can see up here, my message is very clear. I'm a bot as well. I'm the DirecTV bot. I'll answer your DirecTV service and support questions, or I'll get you someone that can. By the way, please don't disclose any PII, things like that. So I'm trying to be upfront and telling them that they're talking to a bot, which is really helpful, especially if you're in the back and forth that I'll talk about in a bit. But you definitely want to identify that it's a bot. And then here, you definitely want to identify that it's a human. And you don't want to mix the two. You don't want to call the top an agent. You don't want to call the bottom a bot. You want to be very clear that this is a person. And I'll just give her a minute here to say here as she reviews. So what she's also doing too, it's important that since this is seamless and this is what happened in my conversation, I don't want to repeat all this stuff again. Don't make me repeat it. I want to stay in my channel and I want it to be personalized. So you can see here, she said, and again, this is not rigged. This is actually what'll happen if you go in here. This is an actual agent. So she'll say, hi, my name's Rose. I'm happy to help. I understand your remote is not working, correct? So she knows up here based on my conversation that I'm having trouble with my remote. So she's first of all confirming my intent and then seeing if she can help further that by reading the context. And then she can go into the rest. I won't show you the rest, but that's kind of how some of our best practices tie into that about being personalized, being seamless, keeping them within the channel of choice. For example, don't provide a phone number here because I started in this channel. I want to stay in this channel, and being contextual. I'll show you that more best practices here. Yeah, that's just an example of what I just showed. So yeah, so some of these best practices I already kind of said already, but I'll go over them again. So expectation handling, meet the user where they are. So if they came in on this channel, talk to them on this channel. If they came in at a certain time of day, let them chat on this, 24/7 if they wanted to. Transparency, inform the user it's a bot and what it can do. It's really important because, legally in some states, you even need to do that. But just from a general user experience, you don't want to trick them. You don't want them to think that it's not a bot. And we do this with words like bot. We use it like design to or program to. Some things to like set that mental model of what bots can do. Don't force the user to use the bot. If they want to say agent, or if they want to, I'm not going to ever keep them in this channel if I really don't have to. For example, in this case, if you say agent, we do ask you, can you just try one question? And then if it's wrong, I will pass you to an agent or I can't answer. So we just try to get that intent from them, but we'll never keep a user in this channel and put the barrier on a human, knowing that it's just a bad experience. And don't make the user rephrase unless you can do something about it. So all these things where you say, I'm not quite sure, can you rephrase that? In our analysis, most of the time rephrasing doesn't help. The intent's not there, or the model's not good enough to be able to pick it up if you rephrase it. So typically rephrasing maybe 1 or 2 times out of 10 might work, but generally it's not. And it's going to just create extra friction and barriers for your user. Humanization, make your AI smart, personalized, transactional, and empathetic to mimic the attributes of a human contact, while not, again, replacing them, but try to mimic them as much as we can, but still knowing it's a bot. And then ensuring you're not collecting any PII or things like that as well too. Unnecessary. So sometimes it is necessary, but if you can get away with not collecting it, I would recommend that. So yeah, so some examples of what you're thinking of just in this one-way channel. And these are good best practices in general, but just some basic principles, I think, to create that, Passover to be the best experience. And then you get into things like asynchronous, which gets a little complicated. So asynchronous is things like, SMS or Facebook Messenger or Apple Business Chat or Google Business Messaging, if you've handled all of those. They're becoming more popular. Google and Apple are definitely pushing them. Facebook as well too. I think it's just not as widely used, but it's the same idea as Facebook. And it's just, it's like email, it's coming back, but it's the difference with email is it's, it's in the channels that we use every day, and they're kind of, we're used to using them. So it's just a trend that's being picked up a lot. What this means though, is that with asynchronous, it means you can, just like when we think of a texting or email, you can come and you can go over days. So if you think about voice, you open, you resolve it, you close it right on the phone call. Usually you open chat, you resolve it. It might take a little longer because it's chat, but you close it. But in messaging, you open, you might resolve, or in the process, and then maybe a day goes by, and then you resolve again, and then a day goes by and you resolve again. So the overall elapsed time might be long, but the actual time is shorter, number one. But number two, you can see these blips of time that, for example, after 24 hours, if the user hasn't responded, you have to make design decisions. Should that go back to the bot? Should it stay within the agent? What happens when it does go back to the bot? Do you tell the user it's going back to the bot? How do you tell them? What happens if you stay with the agent? How do they know they're still with the agent after 24 hours? So all these considerations you have to think about of how, when you're doing more, instead of this one-way path, you're kind of in a ping pong, you can go back and forth, depending on the time, depending on the resolution. And you kind of have to think about how you design for that. And I'll say, just in the past 2 years, we've been doing this. It's a little tricky because there's certain demographics are just still not used to this type of channel and messaging. So you're doing a lot of education as part of this, especially if you're dealing with a demographic that doesn't understand asynchronous is still used to that synchronous type of chat. So yeah, they tend to get a little, you can lose them easily of what's happening. So now I'll get into some fringe stuff, which is kind of fun to talk about. So this one is human to AI to human. And I put some information here around like bot delegation and agent automation. So I'll give some examples here, which I think is kind of fun. Okay, so my first thing, I'm just going to talk to these because they're kind of hard to show. I have some examples here. So, okay. So if we're talking about bot delegation, so think about cases where, like I mentioned on the other thing, PII, sensitive information. Sometimes when you're talking to a human and you have to ask for credit card information, you have to ask for social security numbers. You don't want humans hearing that, and you certainly don't want them recording it, collecting it. So that gets into some type, you can automate parts of the human experience with bots, where the human, kind of like the pizza example I mentioned before. So in this use case, the pizza company did not want their agents to collect that information. It's PII. So they passed them into the bot. The bot did the payment processing, and then when it's done, it would just hang up. So that's a kind of example of bot delegation. The human decides when to bring the bot in, at what time. And if there's any errors, the bot would send that information or send the error back into the human call with the context. That's really important too, because bots can mess up even with payment processing. Credit card might be out of date for whatever reason. There might be an API error. So you have to know how to also design for the non-happy path and know what to do with that, even in bot delegation. And then agent automation is interesting too. That's like, imagine an agent, and this could be in many applications. I'm just using agents as an example, but imagine you're having a conversation with an agent, and there's lots of information that, that agents have to store in their heads, and they may not remember it all. They may not remember how to say it all, or the consistency may not be there. So the bot can actually either listen to a call or read the conversation and suggest information to the agent real time of what the agent should say. It's kind of a little creepy because it's listening to your conversation, and it's like, where, do we have to let users know about that or not? But the application is pretty cool, where you can, it's kind of like, if you think about kind of an earpiece of a translation, it's sort of like that, but it's providing you real-time insights and updates, so that, and then the agent can select those, when to use those and when to not. They don't have to use everything. They can edit before they send, for example. So it just gives the agent the power, but it's just using that AI to provide, a knowledge-based response, or based on the user's intent, but gives still that human the power to decide what to do with it. And then another use case is the AI to human to AI use case. So things like this, where bot supervision comes into play and human process automation comes into play. So the bot supervision is things like, so imagine a bot, a customer and a bot having a conversation back and forth, where this person, I'd imagine this woman sitting in the, watching the bot conversation in a call center, for example. She's not talking to the user. She's not all she's doing is she's watching. And then if she can notice the bot might be getting a little off track, maybe it's giving a wrong information, maybe it's stuck, it doesn't know what the intent is. Maybe, for whatever reason, they can actually control the bot from behind the scenes, with the user knowing or with the user not knowing. It depends on how you want to do it, but they can actually come in and then say, no, this utterance equals this intent. And then the bot would just say it. So to a user, it's all bot, but to a, there's somebody kind of controlling the strings in the background. But the benefit of this is that this is just optimization, but it's just real-time optimization. So this information actually goes back in and then retrains the models, and then the models would actually improve over time. So it's kind of, you're doing this work anyway, so why not do it real time instead of waiting till after the fact? So I think it's a pretty cool application to talk about. And then the thing about human process automation is whenever, for example, you can't automate something through APIs. So let's say you're gonna collect and send something for a human to process. We just ran into this with a retail client we were dealing with, where people would come in and say, I want a refund, and they had some limitations. If it's under $30, the bot may be able to do that, but it's over $30. I don't really want the bot making that judgment call. What if this person's abusing the system and comes in, every week, returning something, getting a refund? So they decided the bot was going to collect all the information and then send it to a back office. So completely bypassing the agent. And then the back office would process the refund request after reviewing what the bot collected. So bots don't have to do everything through APIs. They don't have to automate everything. They can collect and still send it to a human. And then human still makes the final judgment call, because as we've seen with the early examples, bots sometimes just don't know what the appropriate response is. So that is the kind of summary of the current world state and some fringe, interesting new use cases we're trying with some human and bot working together. And I think the thing I'll close on is, we as designers need to remember what bots are good at and what humans are good at right now. And that's going to change. The scale will continue to change over time, but we have to understand right now what bots are good at. So for example, AI is, it's really good at intent determination. It's really good at, having the mundane tasks that humans don't really want to do. It's great at those things. Human agents are really good at like the empathy, the intuition, making judgment calls that a bot maybe can't do, maybe moving things forward that are just too complex, things like that. So if we start to understand what each is good at, we can start to then design experiences where it plays to each other's strengths, and that really makes the best customer experience possible. And then eventually over time, maybe AI can do everything. But for right now, I think there's always going to be a place for humans, even, 50, 100 years down the line. I can still see humans always going to be someplace. Our roles might change, but yeah, overall, I think that's how we have to work together to make the best experiences possible. So yeah, So that's my chat.
Awesome. I'm the only one unmuted right now, so I'll do the audio track that we usually play. That was awesome, Celene. And that was just a masterclass in how to handle, the reckless, rowdy crowd members. So
I've never been Zoom bombed. I feel like oh, I've heard about it, but I'm so excited. Yeah.
I know. It's kind of like on one hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening. No. And then on the other hand, I'm like, oh, is this a sign that you've made it, that like you Zoom bomb? I don't know.
You're big enough. You went to the big guys now. They're starting to find you. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a super interesting to just think about all those different, handoffs between humans and AI, and really good points you brought up about what we as conversation designers who are creating these experiences can do. You talked about a couple of different, scenarios of AI to human as kind of the simplest, and then, going up to AI to human to AI, I think was the last one. Would you say that's like the hardest one to sort of plan through as a designer, just because it's more touch points and handoffs?
Yeah, it's like anytime when you're going from like the async experience, for example, has been pretty tough. And yeah, I mean, the other examples are, I think it's more the technology. You just have to develop the right technology to do kind of 3 and 4. And if you develop the technology, I think it could be relatively easy. But yeah, it's the ping ponging. Like that's what I've seen in the past. And we're doing that today. And it's just, what is the right time to ping pong? What do you say when you ping pong? Timelines and verbiage and all that stuff. So I think that to me anyway, my personal experience has been the hardest. Maybe the other 3 and 4 use cases, we haven't done a ton. We've done a little bit, but we're starting to do more of those. But yeah, I mean, any time I think, yeah, you're going from one modality to another, human to bot, even channel switching, when you're going to voice to digital, you just have to, there's so many more complexities and messaging and education you have to do. So that's where it gets, I think that's where I see most complexity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the channel, like moving from different channels to channels. Have you done anything where it's, the user might be on one channel specifically, and then by design, you think it might be the best experience to then move them to a different channel, like say from web to SMS, if there's a long wait time for the agent queue? Is that like something you've thought about in the design practice?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, especially, and we try to, because it's funny, in our jobs, we have to take account to the users, the best user experience, but also what the company is trying to do. Because we usually design for enterprise-wide companies. And those enterprise-wide companies, like you probably do too, Meredith, you probably have the same challenges. Yeah. So it's just, but companies have their own bottom line, right? It's like, I know we say always try to keep the user in the channel of choice, but the channel of choice might be voice, and voice is very expensive. So how can you balance both experiences? But there are benefits for switching a channel. And like, for example, from IVR to SMS, and you just have to educate the user why that is, right? So in IVR, you could be on hold for a long time. And voice isn't the best. I mean, it depends where you are, but if you're sitting alone in a dark room and you're watching TV, maybe you don't want to be on the IVR. Maybe SMS is better for you. So it's just educating the user what would be better at the right time. If you don't want to wait, if you want to just, text something now and then just get a reply tomorrow because it's not urgent, then maybe SMS or, Apple or Google is okay for you, and I can switch you there. As long as those things, you have to, again, pass the context. You can't start over. You have to, things like that, where if you're going to start from scratch again, I would say, yeah, it's never going to be a good experience. But yeah, it's all about picking the right time, the right opportunity, the right, and educating you what's happening, just because then you can lose them very easily if you drop them, or, the SMS doesn't come through, so waiting on with them before the SMS comes through, for example. So things like that. Yeah. But it's just hand holding the user as much as you can, I think.
Totally. Yeah. Okay, so we have a little bit of time. I want to get to everyone's questions. Oh, you know what? I had one more question for you as you were talking, though, that I think it might be interesting to talk about. So do you find that in certain maybe industries or use cases that the user, it's kind of like the user persona of that use case tends to want to err on one of these experiences in handoffs, more than another. So say like, I could imagine, if your brand is geared more to millennials, they might want to be more self-service than talk to someone, right? That's kind of just the nature of the millennial persona. Have you found that to be the case after you've deployed these experiences?
It's so funny. Part of our design best practices come because somebody that worked on our team, who's at another company now, doing design work for another company, but she's I think of her every time, because what she would say is because sometimes we would do auto escalation. We would escalate right to the agent because we thought, if we can't answer your question, let's just get you there, just pass your context, and we won't even ask you. We're just going to pass you because that's the only possible, right? And when that would happen to her, she would just panic and start to close. And she tried to close the chat window because she gets so nervous. She had to talk to somebody. And it's that introvert, even if it's chat, they don't want to talk. Sometimes introverts just don't want to chat. My husband can say, hate talking to people. So I feel like it's that use. Yeah, it's so true. And she was about, all right, I would think it's, similar. So I think it's just that introverted, I don't want to talk to a person right now. I have to write my notes. I have to prep. Just let me talk to them on my own time. So that's when we started to put more of the, I know it's the only path that's going to usually get them resolution, but let them decide when they want to get that resolution. I won't make them do it now. And it's actually helped our containment rates, because sometimes they just decide that their answer was fine and they don't really want to talk to somebody. And then they actually never end up calling or talking, or they'll just browse around somewhere else or ask another question. So that's why we have that example in there where it said, do you want to talk to an agent now? Or maybe you just want to ask more questions, because maybe there's another, maybe you just want to rephrase it. Maybe there's another intent there. You just want to ask in a different way. So we let them decide when they're going to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally find that to be the case too. You mentioned something about, auto escalating, and then we've called it internally, you don't want them to get stuck in purgatory of waiting for an agent or with an agent and they can't back out. So it's kind of putting that, to your point about bringing the human element into this. The human needs to decide if they, still if they want to talk to a human, or maybe they don't. And people have different preferences, so we have to design for both of those.
Right.
Cool. All right. So I want to get to some questions, and I see a lot in the chat, and a lot of, man, you're getting compliments left and right. I have to speak on behalf of everyone because everyone else is muted. All right. So let me ask a question. There was a really good question in the registration. So Dahlia asked, what about AI makes you worried about the future? That's a big one.
It's so, yeah,
a lot of ways there.
I love that. I mean, I love pop culture. I love thinking about when are robots going to take over, and maybe there will be a time, but I feel like AI for the most part right now is pretty dumb. Like it really is. We're not really anywhere close yet. And maybe we will be one day. But again, like you see the Microsoft Tay example, you see self-learning examples. Most of the self-learning today is like pattern recognition. And I think that's, that's really cool. And I'm glad it's doing that. But that's pretty dumb AI. It's still generally. But, even the bots that were making them seem human, even I was just on a call yesterday with one of the designers for Alexa. And he was saying too, everything you hear is curated. Everything you hear is designed. And maybe one day it won't be. Maybe one day it will be really, truly AI creating their own answers. And I've seen some of that a little bit. Some of the answers are great. Some of the answers are like, nope, not even close. So it depends. But I mean, we're getting there. But for right now, it's still 50-50, I'd say. So until we get to maybe 80-90%, humans are still very much in the mix. So yeah, I'm not really scared right now. I think it's too dumb. But eventually, if we continue, really going that path, I think, yeah, it could be a little scary. What I think more is, I don't think scary, just something we have to be cautious of is how the data is used behind these, the privacy, the fact that we do have to listen to these and read transcripts, and what happens with the PII and the ethical implications. Like ethical and the data usage, I think, are probably the biggest concerns right now, not that AI is going to take over the world. So I think we're okay for a little bit.
Yep, totally. Yeah. Okay, so more questions from the chat. I see a couple now. So Timothy asked, is there a best practice for how long you seek resolution? So I guess to your point of kind of the timing of things.
I'm thinking if seeking resolution, like maybe with the bot, is that what you think that means? Or with the agent maybe?
With the bot. Timothy says yes.
Okay.
We're doing this
Oh, I
by
see it's in the
chat.
chat. Yeah, yeah,
Everyone's
yeah.
muted.
So with the bot, yeah. So yeah.
Cool.
So how long before maybe the bot says like it's just too much for the bot? I'm going to pass you to an agent, for example. So maybe I think maybe what you're thinking is like retries. So for example, one of the things we do is if we give the same intent, and we can make this rule however we want, but if we give the same intent twice or 3 times, we just say, okay, I'm not going to give it to you again. Like it's not going to be helpful. So I'm just going to suggest you talk to a human, something like that. So yeah, a lot of those business rules you can put in like how many loops you do, how many, if they say agent once, agent twice, kind of like on the IVR, if you push 0, but then you push it again and again. So you can do, you can sense when the user gets frustrated, but I try not to even, I want the user to resolve as much as they can within the bot. That's one of our goals. But again, back to the point, I never will make them stay there. So if I sense any type of frustration, we want to give them an out. So yeah, if even sometimes, again, if they give the same intent even twice, you might give them an out. Just say, this is the same intent again. I don't really have any of their intents. Do you want to talk to somebody? So I think it's just, you err on this. It depends on how frugal the company you're designing for is, because they might be very aggressive and never want you to talk to somebody. But if it's somewhere in the middle, I would say, yeah, try to err on the side of the human. On the user experience, and then you can kind of tighten and restrict if you find your containment rates, for example, are not what you want them to be.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. I see that too. We have a rule of, try 2 times, and then they probably need to go escalate. But in certain situations, you have to think about, like you said, if someone says, what was the example? I want to kill myself.
Right.
In certain bots, that's an automatic
Right.
escalation. Or, if you're a restaurant, quick service, and you say there's glass in my food, hello, like alarm bells, right? Like there is, so there's various things there that just need to be like, this is not for a bot, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
We run like a separate negative sentiment filter to be able to detect some of that. Because
Mhm.
yeah, in those cases, that's the one case where we do auto escalate, because we're not going to even ask you if you want to talk to an agent. We're going to get an agent involved right now to help you. Regardless, I know if you're upset, the best thing to do is kind of send in, like a what do you call it, a negotiator, like at one of the police scenes, like send in a negotiator because we need some help here. So yeah, we'll do that automatically. But yeah, typically I agree. There's definitely certain thresholds for sure. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So Lauren, one of our co-organizers, asked, does the messaging channel and underlying tech limit the things you can do to handoff and timing the various connections between human and bot agents? So does channel have a factor in how you do handoff in these situations? We talked about that one a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think most of the settings we've been able to configure. I haven't heard too much issues of like, for example, like, and we have, like, typically we say 24 hours, like after 24 hours, after no response, we hand off from an agent back to human, things like that. I haven't found anything yet of restrictions of back and forth ping ponging. What I have found sometimes is for like Apple Business Chat, for example, you as a user have to say something first before the channel can interact with you for the bot. So the bot can't tell you what it is. It can't say, hi, I'm a bot. This is what I do. This is my scope. I can talk, they have no clue what's going on when they jump into that channel. So often they'll talk to it like a human because they think it's a human. So that's the one thing is like, I get why the channels are doing that because they're trying to reduce solicitation. But by doing that means I can't educate my users what is happening and who they're talking to. So that I feel like is a restriction.
Totally. Yeah, that's because that first utterance is key, right? And if they start off on the wrong foot, ooh, it's kind of hard to
I know. And then they have a bad experience because they thought they were talking to a human. And yeah, so maybe that'll change. And as we talk to them more, we can kind of try to steer them in the right direction. But when you're dealing with the bigger players like Google and Apple, it's harder to say, this is what I want, Google, make it for me. It doesn't work like that.
Yep. Let's see. Okay, so very specific question from Lee. Have you worked with Twilio voice design platform?
Yeah, I've worked with Twilio just in terms of we use them as a gateway for our SMS, but I haven't actually worked on their voice design platform before. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they might have expanded on features. If you know more, Lee, leave us some thoughts in in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, same over here at LivePerson. We're using it as a provider sometimes, but there's some probably new things there we should look at. Okay, so Joseph is asking, how do you document and maintain state for these handoffs? Is it just passing along a transcript or anything more complex? I imagine you could extract relevant details, for example.
We can, yeah, we can pretty much create any custom variable we want, like time on page, location on page, like user, if they've authenticated, all the authentication details so they don't have to re-authenticate. Yeah, so all of that stuff can be just custom variables passed in, which again, it's that balance, right? If we're trying to get these things out quickly, sometimes we don't have time for that, right? Because that's a lot of integration work that we do. It does make the user experience better, but if we're trying to get these things out, within 30 days, it can be tough to integrate all of that, but it is something that you can, and that goes back to optimization, right? Look at really where the experience is struggling. And if you find that, for example, users aren't, you can even read the agent transcripts. And if the agent transcripts, they're just not digging the manual authentication process, they really need automatic, looking at those variables, so you can suggest as an improvement. So it's very data driven. Like we try to do as much data driven improvements as possible, because we don't want to put all that in up front and then it's never used either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to think about state also as kind of that contextual layer that you can add that personalizes it a little bit more. But yeah, it's not always something you can get out in the V1, and you need that data to be able to kind of push for that improvement.
Right.
All right, let's see. Carlos is wondering, do you create a prototype of any kind? Let's see, I might have missed the first part of that question there. Let's see if there was anything else in the chat about that. Let's see. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about your prototyping. How far do you do prototyping? There's a lot of different tools out there, right? And I've seen some other questions in our registration questions actually about, what tools should I learn as an aspiring conversation designer? There's a lot there between, different tools on the market, or do you have any favorites that you like to do for certain situations?
Yeah, it's interesting because it depends, yeah, because we have our own like proprietary tools that we can kind of mock stuff up and see how it's looking. But I mean, yeah, for anybody that's you're just doing design for your own sake, or for smaller companies, or you don't have that, there's lots of tools out there that I think that do really quick. I know it sounds like, yeah, Voxable has something really cool, so I would check that out. I haven't checked it out, but yeah, I think we should definitely check that out too. But other ones I've used, are like a VoiceFlow is one that's local, and I think that's been really helpful for me. It's a lot of different channels you can kind of do for IVR, for chatbot, for things like that, and it's really easy to use. So that would be, and it's free. Like there's a free version, which is nice if you just want to see something quick. So that's a good one I'd recommend. But sometimes just mocking things up, just seeing like, this is how, just the progression of screens would go. If you just want to just take a phone image and say, just type in some text in PowerPoint, that works too, just to kind of see how the flow would be. And if it's voice, it's really easy to prototype voice. It depends if you want to do wizard, pretend that you're the bot or not. But if you don't, you can just have that conversation with somebody and see how it goes. Like one of the things we do is one of our hiring assessments is just design us a pizza, like a ordering pizza app, right? And then the first thing that they should do is call the pizza store, go through it themselves, and then mock it up and then test it, right? And then kind of just go through that experience themselves, just talking to somebody. And that's kind of what's the cool thing about this type of design versus like visual design. Visual design, you kind of have to prototype to see what's going on. Conversation design, a lot of it is just spoken word. So you can easily have a conversation with somebody, see if it works, see if it doesn't. And then, when you add in the visual elements, you can do a little bit of prototyping, but yeah, it's not, I mean, there's definitely some things to do there, but it could be pretty basic too.
Yeah. On the chat side, it's interesting because I've done chat Wizard of Ozing where I just, I pretend to be the bot and I have a friend just message me and see what kind of responses I get in chat. And then of course you have those visual elements, buttons and quick replies that hopefully help someone go down the path you want them to go through.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
when it
Exactly.
comes to that, those prototyping tools, I find I use them in different situations. Like certain clients are, they just need to see it. So you have to do something in like a bot mock or bot society. They really need to see it play out on the screen versus I have some clients that we use Lucidchart a lot of the time, and they want to see the backend processes. They want to know how, where exactly is that message going to connect to their CRM and
Yep.
those sort of things.
Yeah,
So
we do that too. Yeah, exactly. It's something where
yeah,
you don't have to do it to make it work. Like you can build it, but yeah, sometimes just communication, just so you can walk them through the step-by-step process. Yeah, it's less so I guess of a prototype and more of like a full visual design mock, right? You're kind of mocking up the design, but yeah, I totally feel that too. Yeah.
yeah, cool. All right, I will ask you one more question. We're a little
Sure.
bit over, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Just to kind of wrap up here. Let's see. Let's see. Cindy is asking, what would be a best practice to let a user know calling in? So I guess on voice, IVR, that they are speaking with a voice bot.
Well, luckily, I'd say even we have neural text to speech that we use, and even with neural text to speech, you can still tell it's bot. So I think in voice, it's a little. I
Yeah,
mean, you still want to do it, but I think it's a little less critical because the uncanny valley. We're not really close to that right now in voice technology.
yeah,
I have heard some like pretty good like telemarketing bots though that I'm like, oh, I wonder what tech they're using because they can fool people pretty easily. But generally, what I hear is most when you call into an IVR1, you kind of can sense that it's a bot. But I mean, even so, I still think it's not bad to say those keywords, right? Because what we found too is if we say words like IVR, people don't know what that is. Bot, they don't know what that is even. They don't know if you say what you are, like a virtual assistant, all that stuff. It doesn't mean anything to them. What does make a difference is more things like if you're saying designed to help you, programmed to help you, I can get you a human, just those mental model clues. It doesn't hurt to say that in your introduction message, regardless of channel, because it's not adding any extra words, but it's still giving you the context of what this thing is.
yeah, that totally makes sense. On the chat side, people don't read like that intro message. It's like, how many times have we said, hey, I'm a virtual assistant here to help you do these things. I'm a bot.
Right. You
Bot
go
in
right
my,
into it. And you
they
don't even
don't,
get that opportunity in ABC and the Apples and the Googles anymore sometimes. You kind of have to just, so yeah, you kind of have to educate through the whole experience now sometimes, but yeah.
totally. Yeah, especially if it's asynchronous too. People kind of forget
Mhm.
what's happening.
Right. It's so true. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for that super informative presentation from all your learnings over the years. I think our attendees got a lot out of it,
I'm
and thank you.
glad. It was really fun.
Yeah, this was a pleasure, and again, everyone, and especially Celene, thanks for rolling with the punches with our Zoom bombers. Well, we figured out the setting, and we learned from it. So, you know, I guess it happens from time to time, but
Yeah, it means like you
we'll
said, like you got into the big leagues now. So
oh
you gotta
yeah.
have to start password protecting and stuff. But no, that's really cool. Yeah, it was really fun to see everybody and I hope everybody learned something. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can connect and yeah, learn more from each other. I love to learn what you guys are doing too. So yeah, really exciting.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Lean. And thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. We'll see you next month.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye.